Good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk Maywood on Diversity Today Media. I am Dr. Reggie Ratliff, your host. And joining me shortly will be my co-host, my co-laborer in the vineyard, and expert investment analyst, Terrence Hollisworth. He's going to join me right now. Terrence, are you there?
Dr. Ratliff, how are you this evening?
Today was a good day, bro. It was a good day. No complaints, man. The kids are excited to be back at school and trying to get them back on track. But things are going well. How's everything going with you?
I don't know what school you teaching at, but I ain't never seen a kid that's excited to get back to school.
This is special school. It's a private school. So they are
Right.
they are driven about business, and for some reason, the cap is 25 in these IB classes, but now I'm up to 34, and that's a lot of students, man, to teach IB business and economics. But I love it. I love it. I love it. So it's a good excitement. I feed off the energy. So it's a good day. It's been a good week, actually. So yes,
No,
sir.
it's a different space to be. Um, I think I don't know. You tell me, and I know you're in a different kind of a school, but are kids excited about being in the school and learning about business in your classes?
They're excited about certain disciplines. I mean, there are some students who are excited about IB history, and it's really the teacher is what draws the interest and energy. I mean, that's anywhere in the United States or anywhere in the world for that matter. If you are a teacher who's passionate about his or her craft, and you bring the energy and you show that you know what you're talking about, and you're able to draw a good rapport with the students and the student body, I promise they will become passionate. So many of my students are interested in business because they're interested in attending, George Mason, George Washington University, Georgetown University, University of Virginia, Virginia Tech, William and Mary, all the way down to Duke and UNC and Cornell. These are some of the schools that the students that I've taught at the business level are attending. Just it just says something about relationship building, just like in business, right? I mean, you build a
Yeah.
business, you build a brand through building relationships, and people will be believers and they'll come on board.
So this is not totally finance, but we never talked about this. Tell me, how did you come from Maywood as a very tough environment and then become Dr. Ratliff? Because tough kids, tough neighborhood generally don't value education.
Yeah, that's a great question, Terry. I grew up in a family of nine, one of seven children. Um, you know, four brothers, four older brothers, and two sisters. One's older, one's younger. So it's a total of seven of us. And we had loving parents. My dad, the late Emerson Ratliff, and my mom Betty Ratliff, love her to pieces. They brought that old school Southern driven discipline mentality. It starts at home. And we read the Bible together, we prayed together, we ate together. They disciplined us together, and it was we didn't know it was working class community. We didn't know if dad had money or not, but he worked hard. He led the family. He was the head of the household. My mom was an educator, and we stayed together as a family. We played sports together. We did a lot of things, vacation together, and going to church. Growing up, we went to Second Baptist Church. The late W. Sykes was our
Mm-hmm.
pastor, and then we also attended, Friendship Baptist Church, the late Bishop Shelvin Hall, and they were leaders in the community, and they led by example. It wasn't just preaching from the pulpit. They were out in the community. They actually came to our graduations, came to our baseball game, came to the wrestling matches, and things of that nature. And when you have a community like a Maywood, when it was 30,000 strong, 21 blocks, 60153, that carries over into adulthood years. So, it meant a lot as far as camaraderie and unity.
So let me ask you a question. I tell my story about River Forest, but were you conscious of River Forest when you were in high school and growing up? That's a different community.
Yeah. Yeah, here's the thing. I'm so glad you asked that question. We recognized River Forest was there geographically. We actually, some of us who grew up in Maywood, we wound up going to like the YMCA in Oak Park, but we had to go through River Forest, past River Forest Community Center to play basketball or to go swimming, as
Mm-hmm.
in certain times. Although the Hampton pool was also open, but we diversified ourselves by going some places in River Forest and in Oak Park, which is just east of that. And, we weren't intimidated. I mean, we had everything we needed in the village. And it was a model that exists today called asset-based community development that was created by John McKnight, the great community organizer. We used the resources within the community to build out the community. And so we didn't have many problems, at least none that existed, blatantly. So we recognized River Forest was there, just like we knew Melrose Park was there when it was an Italian neighborhood. Just like we knew Broadview was right there. We knew Westchester was down the road, just west of us. But we had our own community and we were together. So I feel blessed and fortunate to have a terminal degree and do what I do in business and finance and in education. But I tell you, it's a lot of us who did well as adults because we had the foundation as children growing up in our various schools in District 89. And we just, we knew River Forest was there, but, we were doing our thing.
Yeah. So before I tell my River Forest story,
Hmm.
I give the audience a little bit about our class on Thursday, what time, how to get a hold of you, things like that.
So here's what's unique about our class, audience. We run our class concurrently every Thursday from 5:30 to 6:30 Central Standard Time. We rarely take breaks. We might do it once in a while, for Christmas or for New Year's, obviously, week or two in the summer. But we run consistently. Why? Because the world of finance never ends. It
Correct.
never stops. So we are always running every Thursday, 5:30 to 6:30 Central Standard Time. And we have enriching conversations, very in-depth conversations about what's going on, whether it's the infrastructure bill, student loan debt forgiveness program, whether it's talking about even the diseases, the monkeypox,
Mm-hmm.
coronavirus, the economic impact on that. We put that out there in real time. You don't have to watch CNBC or CNN, or Bloomberg for that matter. Good resources, but you can get it real time in our classes every single Thursday from 5:30 to 6:30. Your interest in the class, you can express that by contacting me at sratliff68 at yahoo.com. And then I will return in turn. I'll send you an email with the link to access the class. And I'm just excited about what we're doing, Terry. I mean, we have very enriching conversation. The student loan going back and forth, and everything that's taking place, even with the stock market. Obviously, it goes back to the stock market and how it impacts economically. And Terry and I, we aren't just bumps on the logs, just talking out the side of our neck. We are experts in our craft. We are experts in our field, and we share our knowledge with the audience, to those students, and it's very enriching conversation. We have regulars on the show. They actually contribute to the show, and we love the fact that they have their viewpoint, and we have conversation from there. But at the end of the
Yeah,
day,
absolutely.
we need more people coming on because when I see social media and I hear people talking about we need more financial education classes in the schools, we need to talk more financial education. I'm thinking you guys obviously aren't paying attention. You're just talking because I know I post things on Facebook, and also we see the things that I post through Facebook and on LinkedIn and things like that about our classes. So if you don't have a chance to watch it, you can watch it later. So if you want to be edified, if you want to be empowered with knowledge about the world of finance, whether you have no financial knowledge or investment knowledge, or you have 30 years, join us on the podcast. On the show. It's free. Terry could charge any amount of money because he's an expert, but he doesn't charge. He comes in, he answers questions, give advice. You will be better, at least financially, joining our class.
Yeah, no doubt. There's a lot of people that they come on and not on our show, but they come on to Facebook and some of the social media and they're giving advice. And insurance is one of the ones that again, they like to say, hey, insurance as an investment tool. We don't do that. We don't believe that. But come on, come on to the show. I think you'll enjoy it, and that's that. So I don't want to take any more time. I want to make sure we spend enough time talking to Trustee Miguel Jones. So I will tell my Rivers Forest story when I get a chance, though.
Absolutely. We look forward to you joining us again, Brother Terry. And with that said, we're going to bring Brother Miguel Jones, Village of Maywood Trustee Miguel Jones, the Honorable Miguel Jones. This is a continuation of our last conversation. This is actually his second time joining our podcast. He is the first person to come on for the second time on our Let's Talk Maywood podcast. So that just goes to show how much fun and how enlightened we are with this young brother's knowledge and his wisdom and his perseverance to give back to the village of Maywood. Brother Jones is a graduate of Illinois State University with an accounting degree. It's a bachelor's of science degree. He was elected to the Maywood Board of Trustees in 2019, and he has made his presence felt beyond the village that he represents. He's committed to local rebuilding and rebranding strategies that has yielded creative collaboration with various governing bodies, board and community leaders, and prominent Maywoodians. We're going to talk about the collaboration in just a moment. And without further ado, I'd like to bring back Village Trustee Miguel Jones. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Dr. Ratliff, how's it going? Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. I can see you as well.
All right, perfect.
Yes, sir. So let's get down to it, Trustee Jones. There are some things that you are doing. Most recently, this collaboration with the village of River Forest, and there's a lot of excitement because, as Rock of Ages pastor Marvin E. Wiley says, is pregnant with possibilities as far as the partnership and the collaboration. Let's talk about that for a moment. How did that birth itself to come to fruition under your guidance?
Yeah, well, before I start, thanks again for having me. It's a privilege to be on the podcast, and I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
So how this came about, so back in June of 2020, this was right after the George Floyd, murder. And so, of course, social and racial tensions were high. A couple months after that, there was an incident that happened at the Jewel Osco on Lake Street in River Forest. A young Black woman was attacked by a River Forest resident, and that really sparked something in me, and I wanted to react. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was, I reached out to my River Forest counterparts because, one, again, social tensions were high, and I, just wanted to talk about it. But I wanted to not just, I wanted to come up with some sort of approach or reaction to this that I thought would benefit both communities. And I think things like that happen when we simply don't know each other. And so I wanted to come up with something that could formally allow us to come together to get to know each other, because we are neighbors. And so that's where the covenant came in, where we're going to say our response to something like this is to build stronger together. And so that was kind of the founding of that. And, it's been able to grow since then.
Nice. So after the unfortunate incident and you moving towards reaching out to the individuals in River Forest, was it something that happened right away? Was it like that same week or the next week where you said, I need to reach out to our partners, our neighbors just to the east of us and try to have a dialogue? How did that come about? I mean, what was the time frame?
Yeah, it was probably less than 72 hours. So, I sat down. So what happened after that was I had a conversation. It just so happened that the Illinois Black Caucus was coming to the village of Maywood to help us, protest and speak about some of the injustices that were happening in our community. And at that event, I spoke with a Maywood resident, because this was prominent news at the time
Mhm.
about the incident that happened at Jewel. And she mentioned how uncomfortable she already was by traveling through the community, to our neighbors to the east. And I just thought, for us to be neighbors, that's just not how it should be. So that's when I thought about what could we do to try to have pretty much just have more neighborly interactions and avoid those things, because we are two different communities in terms of race and um, you know some people say the quality of life, as far as like how much money people make and so forth. So what I was able to do is just what I wanted to do is I jot down some ideas of ways in which I thought both communities would benefit and would be natural reasons for us to come together. So, a few things that came to mind was one about just getting to know each other. So I thought, a unique opportunity would be for us, one, to come together strategically about some of the things that we have in common. So, I thought about our forest preserve. We share a Des Plaines River. I thought about some of the roads that our community, are adjacent to each other, about ways in which we could utilize this opportunity to, have a partnership. So it called out a few things in terms of um, the way that we wanted to collaborate. First was, okay, this would be an opportunity for us to talk about holidays in which Black people or minorities celebrate. So Juneteenth was one of those. Um, you know, like Mexican Independence Day. Like those type of things. Like we could have joint celebrations for us to kind of naturally, come about. Other thing was thinking regionally in terms of commercial and residential development. So, there's things that Maywood has that River Forest doesn't have, and vice versa. And I think there's ways in which we could lean on each other to create a better atmosphere for both of our communities. Because, ultimately, you don't want there to be a stark difference between when you enter one community and another. You want
Right.
them to complement each other. And
Right.
First Avenue serves almost like our Austin Boulevard when it comes to Oak Park and River Forest.
Good. Yeah. Good point.
There's such a stark difference that they don't really complement each other well, and it kind of creates an isolation type of thing. So it was that, and then also we share the same state, and state representatives and state senators, as well as Congress people. So I thought that'd be an opportunity for us to be able to for items that we both could agree to, we could leverage our relationship to put more pressure on our state and federal representatives to get some of those resources that we need, whether it be for infrastructure or you name it. I thought that'd be a good opportunity for us to get allies and the benefit to improving both of our towns.
I think those are great points. I love the example about Austin Boulevard, and First Avenue separating Maywood from River Forest. And I guess you could look at Washington Boulevard, right? You could take that route to River Forest as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yeah, you see the differences. Like literally when you go over the bridge and you see those homes, and you just see the whole different dynamic. And yeah, those are really good points. As it relates to the agreement itself, is there any way you can outline the agreement in terms of, will infrastructure money be shared, or to what depth will assets be shared or utilized in the agreement? Is that laid out at all?
Yeah, so it is to a certain degree. So I think the first step, because you got to remember, like, this came about because of like a racial incident that happened. So I thought the first part was just getting to learn each other and think about ways that we could organically just build a rapport before we started talking about money and resources.
Okay.
I think about even with a business deal. Usually you want to build a rapport with someone and learn about them before you start talking about resources, because otherwise people, since there is such a stark difference, people start to only kind of lean on that as in terms of ways that we could benefit. And I think
Right.
there's many ways that we could benefit. outside of just that. So the first step was just to have opportunities just to get to know each other. So actually, after we signed or agreed or voted on the agreements, both Maywood and River Forest, in October of 2020, we had a joint meeting at the Maywood Fine Arts where we just thought about an array of ideas and ways that we could collaborate with each other. So, one of those ideas was, as I mentioned, having joint celebrations in terms of holidays. Another thing was, for instance, like Maywood Fine Arts has performed a few times in River Forest, whether it be Trinity High School or some of their universities, Dominican or Concordia.
Right.
There's been equity, marches where, we're looking for resources to, support, some of those non-for-profits and other businesses that both communities, participate in. So that was the first, I guess, outline is kind of let's have those relationships met, or even with the Chamber of Commerce's too. So Maywood has a Chamber of Commerce, and so does Oak Park and River Forest. They have a joint Chamber of Commerce, and so we thought it'd be a good idea to start talking about what are ways in which we could help each other out, build the communities that we want. So that was the first step. But I have my own visions down the line once trust is built. And, we kind of understand each other's financial dynamic in terms of municipal services, because ultimately our resources are pulled from the property taxpayers. And so we want to be respectful of, what the intent of those resources were. But and as we start to, move forward in that relationship, we'll start thinking about joint partnerships, and what would kind of make sense.
So my next question is in regards to you mentioned taxpayer property taxes dominate in terms of services and things like that. Not to think too far ahead or pull anything from your plan that has not been laid out yet, but as far as economics are concerned, is that something that you would like send as a referendum? Should it get to that, as far as utilization of taxes to work with the River Forest, in terms of not purchasing assets, but the utilization of assets, utilizing assets in River Forest? Is that something, and that might require tax money from residents to make that happen? Is that something that you are thinking about?
I would say not yet. Because again, I think we're just so far kind of at the phase one part of it that we haven't gotten that far yet. And I think so let me just kind of say this about how I envision this, 10, 20, 30 years down the line.
Perfect.
So First Avenue, for instance, has always been a conversation since I've been on the board in terms of what's best use for that major interstate that's going through our road. I think there could be opportunities where there could be more retail and commercial business on our First Avenue corridor, or especially around the highway. So, and also even with our public works building, that's something that also serves as our village hall. But really, that's just, it was really meant and intended to, to be a public works facility. I think, down the line, or even, provides, at least to a lesser degree, I think there's ways in which we could think about what would make sense, again, down the line.
Sure.
So, for First Avenue, I think it would make a lot of sense for us to, again, to be able to lean on both of our Chamber of Commerce's, since First Avenue is the border between unincorporated Cook County / River Forest and Maywood, to have to, bring them to the table in terms of, okay, well, we're thinking about bringing these businesses, but we know that businesses, especially in this day and age, you want to bring other people from other towns into your community to also spend resources as well. So you'd want to get their buy-in, as well, in terms of, okay, well, these are the type of businesses that we want to have, and does it complement the development that we see going on, not just in River Forest, but Broadview and Merrill's Park and Bellwood. So I think that's where that comes into play. Our public work facilities, we've talked about for a long time about building a brand new village hall. And so if we ended up building a brand new village hall and moving our staff there, I think we'd have a lot of open space in our public work facilities where maybe there could be a joint use of that facility between both the towns, similar to what we do in Broadview. We have a joint we have a joint call center in terms of our emergency services with Broadview. And
Fantastic.
so, a lot of times we lean on those relationships. One, just because it's a cost savings. A lot of times it's mandated by the state, but it could be a cost savings initiative.
Mhm.
And just because sometimes like smaller towns, instead of everyone having their own individual this and that, it makes sense for us to partner up in those things to, again, so we can scale and use those resources for other things. So yeah, I think I would love to entertain that conversation later on down the line, but
Mhm.
I didn't want to move forward on those type of conversations too early, because I think Maywoodians and folks from River Forest, I think that was one of the what's the word I'm looking for? Like some of the, I guess, negative feedback, initially
Sure.
was this was just about a money thing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe was looking to get money from River Forest, and River
Right.
Forest looking to, donate to the needy, or something like that. And
Sure.
we don't want that to be the tone of it. It's really about just being neighbors, at the end of the day. In the
Yeah.
same way you would look out for your neighbor, it's not about you giving your neighbor money. It's about building that rapport where we both feel like we're living in a safe community, and we care about each other.
No, I like how you put it. I mean, as far as like looking down the road, it may be 20 years, maybe 15, 10 years, don't know. But it sounds like you're letting things grow organically in terms of the relationship and the trust. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's the only way you got to go, especially when you're dealing with people, right?
Yeah.
Although Maywood is from the municipal perspective, we are running a business, and I'm sure they would say the same thing. But ultimately, you're dealing with people in a community, so you want things to happen organically, and not just at the municipal level, but also at the grassroots level. There's
Right.
organizations and so forth that do this type of work,
Mhm.
and universities and so forth, where we want to get them engaged and allow them to kind of naturally build those partnerships. And so I think things like once you build those partnerships, then those kind of um, some of those deeper, capital intensive conversations happen, and more people are interested in it, and it feels normal because again we've had that rapport to kind of have those conversations.
Great point. I want to bring in my partner, Terrence, into this conversation. I know he had a couple questions, but as I do that, as Terrence comes in, I have a question for you again, Trustee Jones. As you mentioned earlier, there are different demographics between the village of River Forest and the village of Maywood, and there are some discrepancies in terms of income base and that kind of thing. We know how River Forest is laid out, and we know how village of Maywood is laid out, but just a couple of statistics that I was able to pull. There's roughly 23,000 Maywood residents, and just over 11, 1,500 residents in River Forest. And we know the dynamics. There are 86% housing owners in River Forest, 62%, which goes to, like you say, property taxes, which goes into services in terms of affordability. And the education level. There's 98% high school graduates in River Forest, 78.5 in Maywood. Bachelor's degree graduates is 80% in River Forest, 13.6 in Maywood. Here's the thing, that two categories that really, really gets me. The average household income in River Forest is 125,000. Maywood is 56,000. The poverty rate is 2.2% in River Forest, 11.7% in Maywood. And one final thing, home ownership price, housing prices, average is 604,000 in River Forest, like one of the highest in the state of Illinois. And in Maywood, it's 158,000. So we see there's some discrepancies, and I think, if I could be just totally transparent, you have a daunting task ahead of you in terms of building it outside of what you've done. When I first saw this, I thought this brother he's gonna need some total buy-in to make that happen. Not just from River Forest, but the Maywood residents. And I must commend you because you've been able to get a lot done organically, as you said. Because I'm of the ilk that a community is built from the inside out, using resources from within. But you've apparently have been able to maneuver around that. Just talk about how you've become successful in making this happen, even up to this point, which is definitely commendable.
Yeah, so one of the conversations that I had So maybe 2 days after the incident, I emailed Mayor Adusi, about just my concern and my desire to connect. Who's the mayor of River Forest? And
Mhm.
it was crazy. She called me like 5 minutes later, and I was
Wow.
just talking to her about how I was feeling, and one of the things that I noticed in their comprehensive plan, they have a portion of it that kind of speaks about strategic partnerships,
Mhm.
and one of their components was about partnering with their neighboring communities to develop some of their corridors and about best use. And I noticed that they mentioned Oak Park, Forest Park, and Berwyn, but they didn't have Maywood there.
Oh, wow.
And that was something
Mhm.
that I think when we talk about equity and being neighbors, like that's something outside of the demographic issue. We have to be intentional about connecting with our neighbors
Mhm.
and being intentional about what's the purpose, right? Because we do understand those statistics, and it's way deeper than just Maywood and River Forest. That's an American story about,
Absolutely.
about the
No
plight
question.
of blacks and our white counterparts. So that was something that I thought could really benefit both communities, and it could be a win-win because all the things that have kind of happened in Maywood over the past 30, 40 years has not impacted their property value.
Right.
It has not, made their community any less safe because something happens on Third and in Madison, right? Um, so it was one of those things where it could be a win-win if we're being very thoughtful about it. But some of those large tasks that you're talking about, yeah, one person can't do it alone. And some of those big discrepancies. That's why it has to be a community effort. And
Mhm.
I applaud some of the community organizations that have already kind of stepped in to think about this partnership and what are some ways that we can mutually benefit. One that I think about in particular is Dominican University.
Mhm.
What's the name of
Mhm.
this? I wrote it or I typed it over here. It's the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation team over at Dominican University. They were one of the first folks to kind of reach out and show interest in it, but also say, okay, what can we do to help build this collaboration? And so I think in general for a lot of Maywood students, that they should be thinking about you know going to school at a Dominican, at a Concordia, at a Triton
Mhm.
College, at a Loyola,
Yep.
and I think that's one of those things that when you start to build that educational, academic, and framework, that starts to impact the brand, but then also the economics as well. Um,
Clearly. Yeah.
and so forth. So I could probably continue down there, but I think there's ways. There's so many moving parts that if you can get some momentum in certain areas, I think you start to see a benefit. And one, including speaking of universities, is student housing. I've noticed that a lot of Loyola students, Concordia, Dominican students, they live in Chicago, they live in
Mhm.
Naperville, and so forth, and they're commuting. And it's like, what a great opportunity it could be for Maywood
Absolutely.
to market to those students, and even for property owners in Maywood. If they have a home that they can't afford anymore, they want to downsize. Well, maybe you should rent it to some students, and
Absolutely.
and then allow you to be able to keep your home. It benefits the students because they're closer to school,
Mhm.
and then you're able to keep your house and build some equity. So I think there's ways in which we can utilize this partnership to help level the playing field of both against once. I mean, level the playing field with both communities, but it's not a one tier approach. It's going to
Yeah.
be several moving parts to help make that happen.
Well,
So, Trustee, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say real quick, Trustee Jones. You raise a really good point. Utilization of the homes, which is assets, right? We're talking assets, utilization of assets. Perhaps leaving it open for college students to rent it out. They do that in many college towns. I mean, students rent homes all the time. They don't stay in dorms; they stay in towns. Especially if you have a Loyola University, UIC, and Concordia Dominican. I mean, that is a way to really boost the community economically. And, I can attest that Dominican University have been great partners. I have a nonprofit based, Maywood based Eternal Light Community Services. And when we utilize the multi purpose building right there, 200 South Fifth Avenue, Dominican University stepped right up to the plate, and they were volunteer tutors, and they led a chef program to teach our students how to eat healthy and to exercise. I mean, they were phenomenal, as well as the Loyola Stitch School of Medicine. They were instrumental, and the dean of the school actually donated 10 computers to the building when we were renting it from the village.
Oh,
And
that's great.
so, yeah, they were definitely engaged. So kudos, shout outs to the names that you mentioned, man. It's phenomenal that they're still doing that work today.
So, Trustee Jones, what I'm hearing you say is that there are a lot of resources. There are some work that needs to be done in terms of strategic planning and things like this. Because, if I had to ask, what do you envision the downtown being? Is it First Avenue? Is it Fifth Avenue? Um, all these things kind of are, to me, sit at the forefront of, if we're going to do something and do it well, we should, kind of go through a strategic planning process. Is the village thinking about doing that, or where are they at in that process?
Yeah, so the board does have or the community does have a comprehensive plan. I wouldn't call it a strategic plan, but I would call it a comprehensive plan that is probably about 10, 15 years old. But it does call out, it does call out that our downtown, which has been Fifth Avenue, and
Mm-hmm.
it talks about the proper land, or the what the goal is in terms of land usage, zoning, and what our community looks like if it's fully occupied, businesses are thriving, and and what those things look like. And I think what we do is, I think it is time to revisit that and amend that, based on where we are in 2022. But again, going back to complementing our surrounding towns, because Dr. Ratliff, you're right. You should kind of use what you have within, and kind of build out. But I think two things can be true. But you also, when you're in a global economy, you can't just think at the micro level. You have to also think at the macro level. And how do you complement, the other, regions, around you?
Mm-hmm.
And so, whether it be with landscaping, for instance, it would make sense on our northern border for us to try to complement our Melrose Park neighbors and our River Forest neighbors, if we're thinking about the east. On the south side with Roosevelt, it would make
Right.
sense for us to partner with Broadview,
Robbie. Mm-hmm.
and, in terms of what that would look like long term. And then with our partnership with Maywood, it would make a lot of sense for us to partner with them, because you want that synergy. Because when it comes to the residents, they just want the experience, right? And so they there needs to be some fluidity there. But to your point, Terrence, as far as that development, First Avenue would be something that hopefully would be just one of our, because First Avenue is one of our highest traffic corridors as far as traffic count. So it's about
Okay.
taking advantage of that. And so we have homes on First Avenue. We have, of course, Proviso
Mm-hmm.
Weeds and then a Forest Preserve. But later on down, we have homes. And I think back in 2000, when Ralph Connor was the mayor, that got repurposed as like a retail space, with the idea that we would look to develop on that to take advantage of that count, of that traffic count,
Mm-hmm.
and then also kind of complement, or have those offerings available for the Eisenhower Tower and ComEd and the
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, Cook County offices over there, where if they want to get something to eat or shop after work or so forth, as well as the community and our neighbors could do that. And so it's really about just all those moving parts, and looking to make some progress.
So, Trustee Jones, tell me this. Before I left out of Chicago, I was living in River Forest, and of course, I'm black. And what would you say to me, professional that you know had a nice home in River Forest and likes to be closer to downtown? And the only way that I can get that is either live in River Forest or live in Naperville or something like this. How do you create a space for someone like me, young professional, uh, one of 3,500 to 5,000 square foot home, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So if I was trying to convince you in terms of living in Maywood. So, I would say, well, really, that's one of our challenges is having housing that appeals to that kind of consumer base. So,
Yeah.
Maywood is mostly single family residential
Mhm.
homes. We don't have a lot of, or that I can think of, we don't have a lot of like luxury, um, you know, like condos or luxury apartments where you might want to live in. So, I would say I think a good opportunity. I would say, hey, you should think about purchasing a home. Maybe on the north end of town. Maybe get a roommate and tell him to pay you rent so you could offset some of the property taxes in our community and build some equity, and then
Well,
hope.
well,
Uh,
see that what you're saying is interesting though, because I don't want a roommate. I didn't have a roommate in River Forest, right?
right.
And so we go in Iowa. We got this thing they call it shovel ready properties, right?
Hmm.
Properties that houses were there, maybe they were dilapidated, they knock them down, and if it was someone like me coming to want to build a home, where would I build that at in Maywood? Do you guys have a vision for dilapidated properties that square blocks that at some point maybe could become homes that we attract young professionals to that can live there and build a nice home there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you definitely could do that. A lot of our vacant homes are privately owned, and so either they, have been foreclosed on and so forth. So you could definitely, use it as an opportunity if you did want to build something, brand new. But I was only just speaking of, in terms of if I was and being a young person, I would
Mm.
say I think it'd be a good opportunity for you to purchase a home in the community, and I think we have the best opportunity for you to have some great equity, down the line. So that would be my
I
seller
guess
plan. Oh, go ahead. I'm
I
sorry.
guess that I said I'm young,
You're
and
not young, bro.
but
You're
I'm
not young.
50, so I ain't too young. I look like I'm young though.
So I want to ask you, Trustee Jones, getting back to the partnership with River Forest. Um, you were talking about letting things grow organically and creating the partnerships, and you also mentioned about I'm always looking at it from an economic standpoint, macro as well as micro, because it connects to the attraction to the partners. Obviously, there was an attraction between Maywood and River Forest, which is why this partnership came to fruition. But I guess my question is in terms of building up Maywood with businesses and things like that, and updating the strategic plan, if you will, or the comprehensive plan. Has there been conversations with that? Because I know Maywood does not have a grocery store. There are some other businesses that can boost Maywood economically, that will reduce unemployment, and thus property taxes will be reduced. How is there a direction that the board is going right now in terms of that?
Well, absolutely. There's been a lot of development, happening already. I think we spoke briefly about Kroger,
Mhm.
coming into the community and you know helping to develop that old Canada Dry facility that had been vacant for a really
Like
long
a
time.
100,000 years, yeah.
Yeah. If you went down St. Charles now, like Ninth and St. Charles heading west, there's been a lot of development in our industrial corridor as well. Um, there's been some restaurants that have, popped up, in the
Mhm.
community. Not all of them are sit down, but there's been restaurants that have popped up in the community. So development is happening, and we are being, intentional. But a lot of times with development, there's other, things that kind of get in the way. Your brand, first and
Mhm.
foremost,
Mhm.
is really important. Safety,
Yeah,
as well, is also really important. So outside of just our plan, and then also taxes too.
sure.
Those are three things in terms of us looking to develop. We have the plan. It's about getting over those hurdles of making sure that we're also addressing those things too, infrastructure as well. And then if a lot of these properties are also shovel ready.
Right.
So there's a bunch of moving parts that I think we have to tackle in conjunction with just with having a plan, and then also mention leaning on those organizations that specialize in these
Mhm,
areas. So, for instance, I mentioned like the Chamber of Commerce.
mhm.
Having a strong Chamber of Commerce helps in these type of conversations, and other community partners that are probably even more versed in that area than we are, and making sure that our community development department is at the table, going to these different conferences, whether they be the NLC or
Mhm.
Illinois Municipal League, and networking as well. So you got to be
Right.
at the table, you got to be able to sell your story, and you got to be able to ensure with these businesses that if they do come to your community, that the community is going to support it and they're going to be in the green. And those conversations are happening. Our Fifth Avenue grocery store location has been looked at quite a few times over the past few years, and so I think we're making we are making progress. But it's almost like a snowball. Usually you kind of got to just get it going,
Right.
then eventually it starts to build that momentum. So I think we're at the beginning phases of that proverbial snowball.
Mhm.
Once people start seeing, construction's happening, like construction is contagious, especially
Yeah.
if you ever been on 290. Once they
Oh yeah.
start, it never stops.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with development. Once it gets out in the atmosphere in that development community that Maywood's building, then they start talking behind the scenes and okay, so what's going on, and then that's how you start to build it up. But you got to just kind of start brick by brick, and then eventually you'll have a wall.
Trustee Jones, do you believe
So,
that
Trustee
in
Jones, I know.
let me ask this question real quick, Terrence.
Now, go
Trustee
ahead,
Jones,
Dr. Ratliff.
these are some great this is a great vision that you're sharing. These are highly anticipated projects that the village of Maywood have been, the residents have been waiting and praying for years, for years. And I can speak that because I grew up in Maywood in the 70s and 80s, how we had the grocery stores the White Way, and we had the Robinson's Towing, and we had the Chats Corner and Flash Car Wash, those businesses that have not been replaced since they closed. And I'm watching definitely with a keen eye to see what you guys are doing, and I commend you for the effort. So the action is starting to come, as you say, it's snowball. Do you think that this turnaround would take place in your time as trustee, or even in politics? Because you know how long things could take. All right, it could take a decade or two. It could take decades.
Hmm.
So this plan, you actually got started at a deficit. So now you're trying to break even, and
Right.
and so how long do you predict this break even will take place and ultimately start to take you in the black, at least financially?
That's a great question. So, um, I would say, and I hate to throw out a timeline, but let me say this: I would say I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later, and here's why. I think politically, Maywood has never been in a better position than we are now in terms of the opportunities that we have. One, speaking from a federal perspective, the infrastructure bill passed,
Mm-hmm,
the Inflation Reduction Act
mm-hmm,
passed. We're talking about trillions of dollars that are going to be flowing through the economy, and Maywood, if there's anything in terms of eligibility for like lower income communities, we should almost always be eligible. So I think we're in a good spot there. um Speaker Chris Welch and Senate Majority Leader Kimberly Lifer being where they are right now and vouching for our community, and also representing River Forest, I think there's a great opportunity as well for them to help us kind of get out that red. Most of Maywood's issue in terms of financially is, aside from police and fire pensions, is the deferred maintenance of our infrastructure and our water lines. And so
mm-hmm.
I believe if we could get ahead of that, then we have the operating budget necessary to maintain. But I think we would also have to be very diligent about maintaining what we have once
Yeah.
it's there. So I would say from that perspective, we're in really good shape. Um, you know, as far as like other opportunities, as far as development is concerned, and so forth, that's again us leaning on those community partners, our community development department, and getting the right people at the table that
Mm-hmm.
have experience, getting communities, especially Black communities on how
Yeah.
to do those things, and having a focus on Black businesses and minority businesses, as small businesses as well. But and I also think there's also um, there's something to be cautioned about developing too fast. And actually, I would almost argue, if Maywood, I think, in terms of like if people could come into the community in general, I think Maywood could be a different community in 2 years, but it wouldn't look the same after that.
Sure.
So, I
Sure.
think we also want to be cognizant of, that's kind of how our economies work. So we also want to make sure that we're not driving out people because we've developed too fast, and then all of a sudden people can't afford it. So I think it's about making sure that we're thinking about this holistically. But I would like to say, I think we're 5, maybe 10 years away from Maywood looking completely different.
Okay.
I can say that confidently. But again, it's going to take some intentionality, and it's going to take more than just the village board. It's going to take a
Sure.
community effort. So if our community's up for it, and if everyone kind of pitches in their own respective ways, I think Maywood's a completely different looking community in about 5 or 10 years.
Now, isn't Maywood changing demographically anyway right now? I mean, with the population, I mean, the demographics is different now than it was 20 years ago, right? The Black and brown, percentage wise, it's changed. It's 30% Hispanic, and let's see, the numbers say there's 30% Hispanic, 60% African American, and the rest is white. That
Mhm.
wasn't the case in the 70s and the 80s. It was mostly white. Then it started to drift to mostly Black. And now the pendulum is starting to swing again. So the change is already happening. Are you talking change in terms of, I dare say, gentrification? Or are you just talking in terms of a different demographic coming in to Maywood with the attraction of, the homes and assets and the purchases?
Yeah, so I was referencing more from a beautification infrastructure perspective, that it would look completely different. But to your point, yeah, I mean Maywood has changed over the past 20 years. And actually, I didn't attend Proviso Weeks, but I did go to the all alumni picnic
Yeah.
that happened this summer.
So you
And
saw something, right?
yeah, so and I think Maywood in general, when we think about just from the beginning, Maywood is not really historically a Black community.
No.
Um, and so you had representatives from like the class of 51 and 52, and those individuals were mostly white people. And then you can just gradually see the transition.
Yeah.
And so Maywood, it goes back to our brand, or really a diverse community, that has since our inception has had several different races and
Yeah.
people types in our community. And
Right.
so I think it's just about us identifying what we are as far as our brand and what we stand for. But we're really a diverse community that is evolving. And kind of what you were saying, yeah, we have over the past 20 years or so, the Hispanic community has, our population has increased in Maywood. But again, that is really, like that could be more of more of a statement of what's happening in America in general.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so, Maywood is seeing that. I think Merrill's Park has experienced that as well. In terms of their demographic change. And so,
Yeah.
Again, that also goes into economics. You have to embrace that change, and you have to adapt to that, and make sure everyone's at the table to help curate this idea of what our community looks like. So
Sure.
it is welcoming to everyone.
For sure. Yeah. Terry, you started to have a question. Started to ask a question.
Well, I think he answered it in a couple of ways. One, my question was going to be, what does the village prioritize going in the next few years? I know that we're in the middle of this infrastructure, and you don't quote me. You said that if you can fix, what part of the thing that you say Maywood can maintain if they fix this part?
Yeah, I was referencing the infrastructure, so our deferred maintenance, so our
Deferred
roads,
maintenance,
our water
okay.
lines, and our alleys and our streets. Yeah.
Okay.
How we look at what the Fred Hampton? I keep calling it Fred Hampton pool because that's what it was when I grew up. So how's
Yeah.
the Fred Hampton aquatic? That sounds painful. The Fred Hampton Aquatic Center.
Oh man,
How was that looking?
yeah, I was just out there last night. Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. hosted his block party in celebration of Chairman Fred Hampton's birthday, and it was a great celebration right outside the aquatic center. Unfortunately, the aquatic center wasn't open, but we were out there, and they had a stage, and they had performances and vendors and so forth. And so, that's one of our staple assets in our community is that pool. And it's really important that we get that fixed. So there's been a couple conversations, around the pool. So I guess going back about a year ago, we received about a $330,000 grant from the state to fix the pool. My understanding is that the pool has had a significant crack in the foundation, and so it was going to need some significant repair. And that number keeps going up. Now, part of it has to do with inflation and material and labor costs.
Right.
The other, I think, driving force is about how do we go about repairing it. And there's been different approaches to that, whether or not we should just build an entirely new pool, or whether or not we should just try to, kind of fix these certain areas. I think one of the issues is, and you probably know this, but that entire area is a lagoon.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All that is built on a lagoon. All of that. Right. All of it.
So there's just infrastructure or integrity issues just naturally in terms of that area. We experienced flooding in our police department. The library experiences flooding, and so it's one of those things that we really have to think about what is the best approach, and that's where we got to lean on our engineers to figure that out. But I will say, I think that should definitely be one of our priorities is getting that pool fixed
for sure,
one way or the other. We just have to get it. We have to get it fixed. One, because you have to use those resources that the state gave us, right? Otherwise, you got to give it back, and Maywood is in no position to be giving back any resources. But we have to figure out an approach, because again, that's not only is it a pool, but it also represents one of Maywood's brightest. So
absolutely.
We don't want something like that not being in tip-top shape. So that's something that is a focus of mine, and I believe it's the focus of the mayors and the boards as well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because that was our community. That's when we came together to swim and to play around in the pool, and we had the baseball field right there, and little league and senior league. It was all the schools coming together, especially in the summertime. And so I pray that you guys are able to do that. But let me ask you this one final question before we wrap up. The pool itself is a staple in the community, has been for decades. Just a suggestion: why not have engineers do a survey and look at the cost of like completely starting over as opposed to repairing it? And how difficult is it to utilize the influence of Chris Welch and Kimberly Lyford and Karen Yarbrough, three powerful people in their own right, that's right there in Proviso Township, to solicit funding from Governor Pritzker? I mean, how difficult is that to even make a decision?
Yeah, well, they probably could speak better to how difficult it is to, get those resources and so forth, because, at the end of the day, I would imagine it all goes back to politics and votes, right? Although they're in their positions, every community wants these resources because every community has needs. So you have, finite resources, and everyone's looking to get a piece of that pie.
But Trustee Jones, this is Maywood. This is Maywood. I understand other communities, but how difficult is it to ask Welch and Yarbrough and Lyford about this asset? That's a community state. They swam in the pool too growing up, so how challenging is it just to ask them or to submit a proposal, to move forward with that?
Yeah, well, kind of going back to what I said earlier, we did receive a grant from the state that Chris Welch, kind of helped spearhead, and that was for like $330,000. And at the time, to my knowledge, I was under the impression that was enough to repair what the issue was.
Sure.
And now I've kind of some of the feedback down the line, especially if we wanted to rebuild another pool, we're talking millions of dollars. And so
Millions.
that's just the scope of the work has changed basically, or could potentially change, because the pool is 60 years old and those things just happen. But it goes back to that deferred maintenance thing that I was referencing, that I was talking about, when it's just like a car. If you don't change the oil or rotate the tires, it doesn't matter what kind you have a Rolls Royce.
Mhm.
If you didn't do those things for 2, 3, 4 years, your car is not going to be in good shape. And so I can't speak to what the maintenance was back then, but I'm only assuming based on that it probably wasn't maintained the way it should have. And so we have some
Right.
issues that now you just have to, you have to, almost start from the beginning. So to that point though, I believe our engineers, and I'll go back and do some homework for the residents to see where our engineers are in terms of what is the current state of the pool and
Sure.
what would it take, what are the options that we have to figure that out. And it never hurts to ask.
Yeah.
But I think the first step is, whatever phase one is to utilize those resources to get started.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So that's phase one. And then phase two is saying, okay, what do we do to kind of build on that? But I think the first step is using what we got, understanding what the issue is, what's the scope of work, what's the best approach, and then the money thing, we could figure out that in down the line. But the first step is coming up with a plan of action and moving forward.
Sometimes you just got to get rid of the car. Just start over.
Right. That's true.
Yeah. But I appreciate you, coming on, Trustee Jones. You've been stellar and, been very transparent, and we thank you for your time. I want to give you the final words as it relates to the partnership, or even just your vision for the Village of Maywood as a trustee. Again, we thank you so much for participating as a guest in this podcast. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Ratliff, for having me on. My vision for Maywood is simple as far as what my approach is. It's to leave it better than what I found it. And so, I think that involves a few things. We need to get the resources necessary to get some of these capital intensive issues out the way. So we got to get our roads and our streets in order. And then after that, we have to make our community a safer place, a place where the youth can enjoy themselves, but also get a high quality education, and where residents, feel comfortable investing in a home and staying for a while. And so that takes a community effort. So, my job is to encourage good public policy on the board. And then everyone else's job is to get in where they fit in. So that means, we got to improve our civic engagement in general. We need to get involved. So that's what people need to ask themselves on an individual basis. Like, what am I doing to improve my community? And so that could be, participating at the park district, whether it be on, a little league team, or, the PTO at your children's school, or, at another non-for-profit. I think it's about understanding what value you can add. And if everyone does their part, I think, our community will be a place in which everyone just has loved and have loved about Maywood for a long time. And I've seen that on several occasions in the community. I mentioned the All Alumni provides a week's picnic, the Chairman Fred Hampton block party yesterday. There's so many, or the Old Timers picnic that just recently happened. There's so many examples of what our community can be when we come together. We just have to continue to be bought in on that and hold each other accountable. So that's what I will leave with is let's hold each other accountable to improve our community, and we'll get to where we want to go.
Well said. Well said. Thank you so much, Trustee Jones. As Trustee Jones says, it takes a village. Just taking some of the words he said from his final word, it takes a village. Those of you who grew up in Maywood in the first wave of African Americans and Hispanics who came through Maywood in the 70s and 80s, it takes a village. We must not forget about our children and have resources that's accessible for them to use, just like it was accessible for us to use when we utilized the resources when we were growing up. We need to pay it forward and give back. It's time. and we're far past that. And so with that said, it takes a village to raise our child in our community. Let's do it, Maywood. I am Dr. Reggie Ratliff. Thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk Maywood on Diversity Today Media. Like us on Facebook. Continue to watch us. We look forward to you joining us next time on Let's Talk Maywood. Thank you. God bless you, and good night.